Hello colleagues, this is being a teacher educator 1.1, which is asking the question, what are my professional identities and how does teacher educator fit within them? So I wonder if somebody asks you, what are you, or better still, who are you? Would you say teacher or academic or researcher or tutor or coach or manager or leader? Would you say teacher educator? Now there's a whole range of us who are teacher educators. At least that's part of our work, looking after supporting the learning of teachers, the professional learning of teachers. But an identity is a story that we maintain about ourselves, and we can have multiple identities. And it's not the same as a role. You might have three parts to your job. They would be work roles. An identity is more about how you see yourself, and it sounds as though it's very individual and personal, but in fact, it's formed through your context and through your work relationships. So it's worth thinking about our own professional identities, not least because the teachers we work with, especially the pre-service teachers that we work with, they are developing a professional identity during their initial teacher education program. And we need to shape that to some extent, or help them to shape it. Now, identity is also important because, for example, you might have school teacher still as one of your identities. Depending on your work context, that may well be a big part of your work. And as a school teacher, you are developing teachers' practical wisdom every day through your experiential learning, your work in school, your reflection on that work, and your collaboration with colleagues around that work. And that's a valuable source of knowledge. What about somebody who moves, say, to a higher education position as a teacher educator? Well, they're still developing practical wisdom, but it's practical wisdom in teaching teachers in higher education. It's not that school-based practical wisdom of teachers. I guess they might be more able to engage with scholarship. So that's another valuable source of knowledge, the literature. And if teachers are going to develop research-informed practice in schools, they need to engage with both sources of knowledge. So in a way, how you identify what stories you tell about yourself will also, to some extent, reflect your priority for professional learning in those two sources of knowledge, the status that you give to different sources of knowledge as well. I mean, it's difficult for school-based colleagues, often school-based teacher educators, to engage with the literature. There's access, there's time, there's priorities, and so on. There are formal ways of doing it, I guess, through studying part-time, or less formal ways, but still more project-based, like joining a research project, or even starting a collaborative research project. And on the other side, how do teacher educators based in higher education continue to at least stay in touch with the practical wisdom of teachers? Well, one way is by co-observing, say a pre-service teacher. If I go into school and watch a teacher teach, it's really powerful if the class teacher is also there, who's maybe acting as a mentor to the pre-service teacher, and then we debrief and have a discussion about the lesson together. Of course, everybody in that triad is learning, or hopefully in the best practice, they're all learning. And one thing about being a teacher educator who's based either in a university department or for example, in a separate provider of teacher education, is you're visiting lots of schools, or you may be visiting lots of schools, and so you're getting to see different practices, different work contexts. And often pre-service teachers might get experience, hopefully, of more than one school during their initial teacher education program. So I wonder what professional identities you've actually got. Let's suggest some, but I'd like you to think of that. Really, is I guess in my case, I do identify as a teacher educator. I'm university-based teacher educator. I do identify as a teacher in higher education, a university teacher, like a tutor or lecturer, you might call it. I also act as a research supervisor and a research mentor, a supervisor to doctoral students and a mentor to teachers. I collaborate with teachers in their practitioner research. So that was research mentor, research supervisor, university teacher, teacher educator, and educational researcher. Okay, so I wonder what yours are. Maybe teacher educator is in there, hopefully. A teacher educator, maybe a school teacher, maybe a leader of some kind or manager, maybe a researcher. Okay, so write those down, and then when you think you've got most of your professional identities identified, then you could perhaps allocate, say, 100% to them. Remember, this isn't about your work roles. This is about how you identify. So if I asked you, who are you? Who are you professionally? These are the kind of identities, the stories you would tell about. Some, I'm in part, I'm this. In some parts, I'm that. You could allocate your 100%. Share it out among those identities that you've found. And then you could think to yourself, what about in 3 years' time, or even 3 to 5 years' time, but 3 years? In 3 years' time, would you like to imagine yourself or see yourself sharing your 100% differently? Would you like to identify more in some of those professional identities and less in others? And this kind of exercise, this kind of just thinking about professional identities, as I said earlier, it's important because your pre-service teachers are developing an identity, hopefully, as a teacher, as a school teacher. And what kind of teacher are they identifying as? What are the characteristics of the teacher they want to be? And hopefully in their school placement they can find identity role models. Maybe one person who just seems to have maybe they're well respected in that school and they have characteristics that the pre-service teacher would like to develop. So it might be their identity role model might be one teacher, but they might take something from one teacher and something from another and say, I'd like to be like that kind of teacher. And lots of teacher education programs do some explicit identity work, and I would recommend that you look into that a little bit and read about that and read around it. Okay, well, this links to 1.1, multiple professional identities of a teacher educator, and there's a Substack written article about it as well. And in the book, Being a Teacher Educator, there's a chapter about professional identities, and then a subsequent chapter about social identities, and that's a matter for another video. Good luck.